Something is unfolding beneath the quiet surface. And if you have been sensing it lately, it is not simply your imagination. A final, weighty decision is gradually taking shape within their heart. And somehow, your presence is woven directly into it. On the outside, they may appear calm, distant, or emotionally detached. Yet a truth they once avoided has become too significant to ignore any longer. This is not only about missing you, it is about what your connection awakened within them and forced them to face. They are standing at a major crossroads, and every path they consider somehow circles back to you. For a long time, they attempted to distract themselves with routine, noise, work, pride, and emotional distance, believing silence would eventually weaken their feelings. But some connections do not simply fade away. The more they tried to suppress it, the more their inner world treated it as something meaningful and unresolved. Now they are looking back and questioning the story they convinced themselves to believe for so long. One side of them feels drawn toward you with an undeniable force, while the other side resists because accepting this truth requires complete honesty and the release of old defenses that once made them feel safe. They are finally sitting with the reality of it all, wondering why thoughts of you continue returning during quiet moments, and why no one else has ever truly taken your place. This is the heavy space that exists just before clarity arrives, where the mind can only resist for so long before the mask begins to crack. If they return, it will be because they recognize that a connection like yours does not come around twice in a lifetime. And if they choose to walk away, it will never mean you were lacking in any way. It will simply mean they were not prepared for the level of honesty and inner transformation that loving you required from them. That is why your role right now is not to chase after them, not to force anything, and not to attempt to control what happens next. Allow truth to unfold naturally in its own time. Allow time itself to reveal what words could never fully express before. What is happening inside them carries real depth and significance. It is not a passing uncertainty that will disappear tomorrow. It is a profound internal struggle that continues growing stronger. On one side, there is an emotional pull toward you, filled with memories, warmth, longing, and a deep sense of belonging that feels impossible to replace. On the other side, there is an old protective voice shaped by previous pain, disappointment, and the fear of being hurt again. That voice tells them to remain guarded, to stay distant, and to protect themselves no matter the cost. These two forces are colliding inside them, and the pressure is becoming more difficult to ignore with each passing day. They may attempt to hide behind everyday responsibilities and familiar routines. They may keep themselves constantly occupied with different tasks. They may behave as though none of this matters anymore. Yet the more they bury it beneath the surface, the more it rises back up. Because the true struggle was never outside of them. It has always existed within their own heart and mind. And that is precisely why the next step carries so much importance for their future. You became a turning point in their life without either of you fully realizing it at the beginning. Even if neither of you understood it completely at first, something about this connection challenged the walls they built to survive their past. It reached the version of them that existed beneath control, beneath appearances, and beneath all the careful ways they learned to protect themselves over the years. Now they are facing a difficult choice that cannot be postponed forever. They can remain within the limits of who they have always been, or they can step into an unfamiliar version of themselves. That new version requires courage, vulnerability, and emotional risk that feels foreign to them. This inner conflict is exhausting them from the inside. It reveals itself through the inconsistency you have felt, the push and pull, the shifts between closeness and distance, the moments when they seem ready to move forward, followed by periods where they suddenly retreat again. This is not always manipulation or a game. Sometimes it is what happens when someone deeply desires a connection, but fears the transformation that naturally comes with it. As this pressure continues to build, It begins burning away the illusions they once relied upon. They can no longer convince themselves that you were merely a brief chapter or passing presence in their life. They are being pushed to see you with greater clarity than ever before. More importantly, they are being pushed to see themselves differently as well. Old memories return with renewed strength. Shared emotions resurface with even greater intensity than before. Every silence carries more meaning now. Every absence feels heavier upon their heart. This discomfort is necessary because genuine decisions are not created through avoidance or escape. They are formed when confusion starts to clear, and the heart is no longer willing to remain hidden beneath fear and uncertainty. And that clearing is happening now, even if everything still appears quiet on the surface. There comes a point when uncertainty becomes too heavy to carry any longer, and they are steadily approaching that point. Not because anything outside has changed dramatically, but because the mind cannot remain divided forever. For too long, they tried to manage their feelings by minimizing them. They told themselves it was not truly important. They convinced themselves they could handle it, that it would eventually pass, and that it did not require any real action. But something deeper within them knows that is no longer true. That awareness is what is bringing everything to the surface with increasing force. Emotions this deep do not remain still, nor do they disappear easily. They continue growing in silence and evolving even through absence. They wait until a person can no longer deny what exists within their own heart. Now those emotions are returning in waves during late nights, in quiet pauses throughout the day, in memories they never expected to revisit so intensely, and in the strange stillness that follows a busy schedule. They are beginning to notice how naturally their thoughts drift back to you again and again. They are noticing how your presence remains like a quiet hum in the background of their everyday life. They are realizing how distractions fail to erase the feeling that something meaningful is missing. Your absence has played a powerful and silent role in this process. By stepping back, you left them alone with their own thoughts. That silence became a mirror. It forced them to confront the missing comfort, the missing spark, and the emotional security your presence once provided. When they finally felt the true shape of what was gone, they stopped questioning whether it mattered and began comparing your rare depth with the emptiness of everything else around them. Inside them, fear and desire have now collided with full intensity. On one side is a warm and instinctive pull toward you. On the other side is a loud, protective fear of losing control and exposing old wounds that never fully healed. Yet for the first time, their desire is beginning to speak louder than their defenses. This creates an intense inner storm of hesitation and longing. They remain caught within this difficult space, not because they do not care, but because they are enduring a silent battle that is pushing them toward a major breaking point. This is no longer just about a relationship. It has become a defining moment of personal identity and a choice about who they truly want to become. While they may seem more unsettled or distant on the outside right now, do not mistake this behavior for the end. They are realizing that remaining trapped in the exhausting middle ground of being neither fully present nor completely gone has cost them their peace. They are finally being forced to take responsibility for what they feel. They are being asked to exchange the safety of their old life for a connection that demands growth. The hesitation that once felt like protection has now become a prison. The walls they relied upon are beginning to crack beneath the weight of what they can no longer deny. They are vividly remembering the moments they remained silent when they wanted to speak. They are remembering the times pride stood where honesty should have been. They are revisiting conversations, opportunities, and choices that now look different through the lens of understanding. The gap between their feelings and their actions is gradually closing, making real change not only possible, but necessary. When a person spends enough time alone with their own thoughts, truth begins rising above the noise of everyday life. That is exactly what is happening within their inner world now. This shift is not being created by outside pressure or influence. It is emerging from within them. It is the result of an internal transformation that becomes stronger with each passing day. They are beginning to understand that running from their feelings never truly freed them from them. Avoidance only delayed the moment they would eventually have to face the truth. And now, that moment is arriving. The questions they once pushed away keep returning. The emotions they tried to silence keep resurfacing. The connection they attempted to minimize continues proving its significance in ways they can no longer dismiss. There is a growing awareness inside them that some choices shape the course of an entire life. Some people enter our world and quietly alter the direction of everything. Whether they expected it or not, your presence became one of those experiences for them. That realization carries weight. It carries responsibility. And it carries the uncomfortable understanding that certain opportunities cannot be ignored forever. The deeper they look within themselves, the harder it becomes to pretend that nothing has changed. They are seeing patterns they never noticed before. They are recognizing fears they once disguised as logic. They are becoming aware of how often self-protection has prevented them from receiving the very thing they desired most. This awareness is not easy. Growth rarely is. It requires them to question old beliefs, challenge old habits, and release old versions of themselves that no longer serve them. It requires them to choose between remaining comfortable and becoming authentic. That choice is becoming impossible to avoid. What once felt distant now feels immediate. What once seemed uncertain now feels undeniable. The emotional truth they spent so much energy resisting continues moving closer to the center of their awareness. Even if they have not spoken it aloud yet, something important is changing inside them. The emotional walls are weakening. The old excuses are losing their power. The certainty they once had about staying guarded is beginning to fade. In its place, a deeper understanding is emerging. They are starting to realize that strength is not always found in keeping people out. Sometimes, strength is found in allowing yourself to be seen. Sometimes, courage is not about maintaining control. Sometimes, courage is about surrendering to the truth. That is the threshold they are approaching now. The closer they move toward that realization, the more difficult it becomes to continue living as though nothing happened between you. The connection continues asking something of them. Not perfection, not certainty, simply honesty. And honesty has a way of demanding attention when it has been ignored for too long. That is why this period feels so significant beneath the surface. While little may appear to be changing externally, an enormous shift is taking place internally. Thoughts are becoming clearer. Feelings are becoming stronger. Resistance is becoming weaker. A final decision is forming slowly but steadily. Whether it leads them toward action or away from it, the process itself is changing them. The person who emerges from this crossroads will not be exactly the same person who entered it, because once someone truly sees the truth within themselves, they cannot completely unsee it again. And that truth is growing louder with every passing day. They can no longer hide behind uncertainty the way they once did. The connection has become too present in their quietest moments. It continues to surface whenever everything slows down around them. It returns when they try to direct their attention elsewhere in life. And this repeated return is doing something important to their awareness. It is gradually changing the way they view the story of your connection over time. What once appeared to be a series of random moments now feels like a meaningful pattern. What once seemed confusing now feels filled with purpose and depth. They are beginning to realize that they were not simply missing a person from their life. They were missing the version of themselves that came alive around you, more open, more sincere, and more emotionally connected than they usually allowed themselves to be. And the pain of living far away from that version of themselves has become too strong to ignore any longer. This marks a significant turning point in their journey. Understand this clearly and without hesitation. When someone begins missing who they became with you, the question is no longer whether the connection mattered. The question becomes whether they are willing to return to the truth it awakened inside them. As this awareness continues deepening, the outside world begins losing some of its power to distract them completely. They can keep themselves busy with endless activities, surround themselves with people, or throw themselves into work, goals, plans, and constant noise. But beneath all of that movement, there remains one quiet current leading back to the same place. Back to you, back to what was felt, back to what still remains unfinished between you. This is the stage where the protective ego slowly begins losing its grip. The ego seeks distance and control at any cost because it believes that is where safety exists. Yet a deeper part of them is beginning to understand that complete disconnection carries its own kind of pain. It carries its own emptiness, and sometimes that emptiness becomes heavier than the fear of closeness itself. Now they find themselves carefully weighing two possible futures: the familiar life they know, with all of its emotional emptiness, or the unknown path that carries risk, but also the possibility of something genuine and meaningful. For the first time, that possibility is beginning to feel more valuable than the protection they once chased. This is where courage starts growing inside a person. Not when fear disappears completely, but when truth becomes more important than fear. With this realization comes a quiet stillness that begins settling the restless energy within them. The pressure remains, but it feels different now, more steady, more focused, more honest than it was before. They are no longer resisting every feeling that rises within them. They are beginning to allow those emotions to speak clearly. They are starting to accept that what they feel is real. And that acceptance creates a quiet sense of peace within their heart. Not because everything has been resolved yet, but because the inner conflict is slowly transforming into inner clarity and direction. They are standing at the edge of an old version of their life, while looking toward a new possibility that feels unfamiliar. And the only bridge connecting those two worlds is a single, honest choice they must eventually make. This is the moment of reflection and transparency. The silence that once protected them is now reflecting them back to themselves with complete honesty. It is showing them where pride blocked love, where fear blocked truth, and where avoidance created distance that never truly needed to exist. They are revisiting conversations, memories, glances, and pauses from the past. But now they do so with greater maturity, deeper awareness, and a broader emotional understanding than before. They can clearly see where fear made the decisions in the past. They can also recognize the value of what was naturally trying to grow between you. This is not only about regret or looking backward. It is about reorganizing what truly matters in their life. The things they once placed above connection, image, control, safety, and emotional self-protection are beginning to feel empty compared to the depth of something real and authentic. And another important shift is taking place inside their heart. Empathy is steadily growing within them. They are beginning to feel what their distance may have felt like from your perspective. They are starting to understand the emotional weight you carried while they stood back in confusion, uncertainty, or hesitation. That understanding softens a person from within. It humbles them gently and makes it increasingly difficult to hide behind emotional coldness. Because once responsibility enters the picture, everything begins changing in meaningful ways. They are no longer reacting only to fear. They are beginning to become the author of what happens next. And when someone reaches that stage, everything becomes more serious in a deep and thoughtful way. Not dramatic, not loud, but deeply significant. Because now they understand that whatever happens next will reveal something truthful about the kind of person they choose to become. The final layers of hesitation are slowly beginning to dissolve. The old thoughts of should, could, and maybe are losing their hold. In their place, something stronger is taking shape inside them, a sense of must, a feeling that grows more urgent with each passing day. They must acknowledge what is real between you. They must face the truth of what they feel. They must stop wasting time in emotional paralysis that keeps them standing still. Time itself is beginning to feel different to them now, more valuable, more precious, less endless than it once seemed. They are realizing that remaining stuck is also a choice, and often the most painful one in the long run. This clarity is not living only in their thoughts, it is something they feel physically. It appears as quiet pressure in their chest when they think about reaching out, speaking honestly, or taking meaningful action. The unknown still frightens them, but the familiar emptiness of staying disconnected is beginning to frighten them even more. And that is why movement is drawing closer with every passing day. Words that were once held back are rising toward the surface naturally. Actions that once felt impossible are becoming harder to avoid. Because once truth grows this strong, silence stops feeling safe. It stops feeling comfortable. It begins feeling unbearable. Remember this important point. Whatever they do next will not come from a random impulse or sudden idea. It will come from a long, difficult, and honest process of finally facing themselves without excuses, without distractions, and without hiding. That is why this moment carries so much significance. It is not a passing emotion that will disappear quickly. It is a reckoning that changes a person deeply. Slowly at first, quietly at first, and then all at once when the moment arrives. At the center of everything stands one undeniable truth. You changed something within them in lasting ways. You reflected a part of their potential back to them. You became a mirror, a catalyst, a steady point during a period when they felt lost inside their own uncertainty. Even through silence, your impact remained present. That is why they are reaching a deeper level of awareness now. The noise is gradually fading. The path is becoming clearer. The question is no longer whether this affected them deeply. The question is when they will fully act on what they now understand. Layer by layer, their confusion is falling away. In its place, a quiet and grounded certainty is emerging. They now understand that trying to control their feelings only made those feelings stronger. And pretending not to know the truth is no longer a realistic option. Something incredibly real is reaching its final stage inside their heart. It is pushing them toward a decision. A decision about whether they are ready to live from a place of truth instead of fear. Your role during this powerful moment remains simple. Stay centered. Stay calm. Resist the urge to chase what is already being brought into the light. Allow them to experience the full weight of your absence. Allow them to recognize the true value of your presence. Allow them to understand the real cost of pretending they feel less than they actually do. The person who once hesitated is approaching a line they can no longer cross back and forth. Their inner conflict is gradually transforming into clarity. Their uncertainty is becoming purpose. Their hesitation is becoming direction. Step by step, something important is changing inside them. Soon, one undeniable truth will rise above every excuse that came before it. It will reveal exactly who they are when life finally demands courage. When that moment of clarity arrives, it will show that the quiet before the truth was never empty at all. It was simply the loudest and most necessary part of the journey. If this message resonates with what you have been sensing, hold on to it with patience and hope. Trust the timing of what is unfolding. Trust the process that is taking place beneath the surface. Because the next chapter of this connection may be much closer than it appears. What is happening now is not simply an emotional reaction. It is a deeper awakening taking shape over time. The walls that once felt permanent are beginning to weaken. The fears that once controlled every decision are losing some of their influence. And in that space, something more authentic is finally being allowed to emerge. The truth has been waiting patiently beneath the surface all along. Now it is beginning to rise. And once a person truly sees what their heart has been trying to show them, returning to ignorance becomes impossible. That is why this moment feels different. That is why the energy feels heavier. That is why the silence feels charged with meaning. Something is reaching completion within them, and with completion comes choice. The choice to continue running from what is real, or the choice to finally step toward it.